I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and actually I have decamped to Buffalo, New York because I did not have power in Torrington for a few days, and I had my mother and her dog with me. So we just decided to come back to New York State a little bit earlier than we intended. But I will be back in the state next week. So my background is actually in mechanical engineering, but I did a change of career and into urban planning, and that's how I got myself in this situation here. So as far as the long-term recovery committees, I am serving on the steering committee for Demis Region 5. John Field is kind of the facilitator of the whole group. There are representatives from the three COGs that are part of Demis Region 5. That's Western Connecticut Council of Governments, Northwest Hills Council of Governments, and the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to say more about the long-term recovery committees at this point, but I'll let you take over for a minute, Kevin.
No, that would be helpful, Joanna. I mean,
Okay.
I do know, we'll kind of boil it down to the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, but I think having the umbrella view will help us to do that, to understand it.
Okay, so first of all, the whole idea of long-term recovery committees, and John, if you want to jump in and give your ideas, please, by all means do. But it was an initiative by the state, and it came out of this Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security and FEMA, and they've created these kind of long-term recovery committees that have addressed issues after major emergency and disaster events. This COVID-19 is very unique in that it really didn't, until we had this tropical storm on top of that, it didn't really have any physical damage, that kind of a thing. There weren't any blocked roads. It was much more of a public health emergency, public health response. And on top of that, it's been affected, as you all know, economically, socially, social needs, cultural needs. It's affected so much more than what FEMA had originally intended for this to do. The state has tasked the Demis regions, then there are 5 Demis regions within Connecticut, with trying to identify any and all unmet needs. And what they've, and I wish next time invite me to a group, or I could send you an org chart of everything, going back and forth. But the idea is that within the Demis regions, there are these steering committees. These steering committees have subcommittees in sector specialties, so jobs and business, culture and recreation, and so on and so forth, health and human services. So those subcommittees are going to be kind of resources for you, the local subcommittees, local committees. So the local recovery committees are the experts on their area and what their needs are. And what we're hoping is that you, as this committee that's the expert on Southbury, will help us understand what are the unmet needs that you're seeing. So, and the idea is that Southbury, if there is something that Southbury just cannot handle among your committee members and that resources, perhaps that's something that the COG can tap into and the regional, the regional steering committee can tap into. If it's something that a whole bunch of subcommittees are seeing, hey, we can't address this. There's this unmet need that we're seeing it in Southbury, Woodbury, Oxford, all across the region. Hey, is there something that the state can do? And that's when this steering committee will raise it to the level of John Field and work on those unmet needs, sorry. John, did you want to add something at this point?
No, I think you hit it, right on the head, Joanna. And the effort really started with the governor's office, and as we moved in through this whole COVID thing, this event is something unprecedented that we haven't had this type of event ever really. And so what we're doing is we're trying to work through this and try to discover the best way to reach out to our constituents and our residents to identify all and any unmet needs, because there's lots of them. And, and then when you identify one, that leads to more, and, and it goes on and on and on. So the work, there's a need at the local level for those people like yourselves that, have that connection at the local level to identify what those needs are really, and then once we identify what those needs are, how do we address them? What do we do? What resources do we have available to us at the local level to address them? Then if we can address them at the local level, how does it get moved up? And it's usually, like I was telling Kevin earlier, it gets moved up, through the COGS and through Joanna, and basically will make its way to the region, where maybe at the regional level, there's some resources that we identify through the regional steering committee, the actual, the subcommittees that are there. Again, these are people that have all these different connections throughout the different regions and stuff like that. So again, trying to make that connection, and then if we cannot meet that need at that level, then we move it up to a level at the state to see what resources are there at the state to try to address those needs. And that's basically how we've tried to set this up. And and we tried to be so diverse in the selection of our membership for the steering committees, in the subcommittees, to assure, we capture every single bit of our very diverse region. We have a very diverse region, and there's so many different things that we've tried to reach out and touch. And still, then we may miss something. But again, we're trying every little bit. And that's why it's so important that we connect at the local level, at the regional level, to assure that, maybe if we don't reach it at the regional level, it's reached at the local level. And you guys, have those boots on the ground type people that can really connect. And it sounds like, just by listening to the introductions, that you got the right people, Kev, on your team here to help make that happen, because that's what needs to happen here. Is we need to really, this COVID has identified so many and touched so many different people in so many different ways that there is a tremendous, and we know there is a tremendous amount of need out there that we need to take a look at and make sure we don't miss, because, and it's not over. That's the problem with this COVID thing. It started and it's still ongoing. So, and this is unheard of, because usually recovery, we start after, so this current storm, it's gone through, it's done its damage, and then we start to talk about, recovery. But COVID, we're right in the middle of it still, and doing our thing and trying to identify what those needs are. So establishing these committees at the local level, at the regional level, at the state level, allows us an opportunity to start to gather some of those needs. But we also understand this is going to be ongoing, and we're going to have more needs arise as we move forward, and try to reopen schools, that kind of stuff. So I think I've said enough already, but there's so much involved. We can go on forever. So I think Joanne covered the gist of it, and I just threw my little 2 cents in there, but I think you're on the right track.
Dan, did you want to say anything before we move into our third bullet on the agenda?
No, I'm good, Kevin.
Okay. So we've kind of laid it out as to the purpose of what we're trying to do, is plugging in, serving at the local level to provide the closest touch point to identifying needs as job one, and then two, how do we tackle addressing the needs that we've identified. So that's the primary thrust of the two charges of this committee. And from there, when it comes to sort of the reaching, the connection to the regional level and beyond, that's probably not that's gonna be either myself and or Dan, and it's not necessarily going to be the charge of any one particular person on the committee. The main purpose of everybody on the committee is to, in their individual sector, is to figure out a channel to ID those needs and then report back to this committee. So the report back part is right now the idea would be around having, if we can, a weekly meeting, and it doesn't have to be lengthy. The purpose of it is just predominantly is to be that report back. And so I thought, while we have everybody, just about everybody except Sarah on the call, maybe we could attempt to nail down when that weekly meeting could be. If the virtual meeting makes the most sense, both because of COVID and also because of logistics and timing and everything else, we can certainly continue this as a virtual meeting. Couple choices I threw out there on the agenda was, Monday at noon, Thursday at 2, or open. So if you feel strongly that we should do this as like a doodle pool, or we just send it out by email and just kind of let everybody plug and play and figure out which date and time works best, we can do that. I know we've got a fair amount of schedules to consider. Any thoughts on how best to nail down a meeting time?
Kevin, the only question I would have is approximately how long do you envision this on a weekly basis? And will it be interactive, or will we be sending you comments, questions, responses throughout the week for you to gather? So for example, if we're talking about needs in the community, is it depression, is it unemployment, that sort of thing, how are we going to feed that? Because obviously we're all very busy. And I think weekly is great, but having it in a very concise time limit would be helpful.
Absolutely. I wasn't envisioning it being longer than a 30-minute block. I think that we can all, could come together and relay what we need to relay. It's obviously helpful to have, a paper sheet or something where it's all consolidated. That would be great. But yeah, there's no really, and basing it on somewhat, Dan, right, what we did with the EOC meetings, those got even more concise as we went along. Maybe in the beginning it's kind of finding your way a little bit in terms of the report back, but they ended up getting very tight. In fact, they ended up coming down to like 15 minutes, I think, right?
Yeah, at the end we were 10, 15 minutes, and then we were done. So yeah, that's how I envisioned it also.
The helpful thing about having it be collective, and ideally, in a forum like we're doing right now, is just that one thing might springboard off into another in terms of conversation. If a need is identified, it comes up, and yeah, that's similar to what I see, in my sector. Because there is going to be some overlap, and I think it'll help with the synergy if we are doing this in a collective fashion.
And I actually think, Kevin, we can be fluid. Like, if someone can't make a meeting, that's okay.
Yes.
We still meet, and whoever can make it, great. And then next week, hopefully that person can join us and report back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think that's also what's nice about having a consistent time and versus having it be floating each week to week. It'd be best if we had a specific time and day. And then if you can make it, you can make it. If you can't, send in, like you said, Dawn, what you've identified, what you've gathered. And then Dan and I will take it and move the appropriate communication up to the regional level if need be to address it. Although, as he mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, we are looking at, for example, the possibility of a way to identify some financial resources that the town may be able to provide based on the needs we identify. If it seems like that's part of what we need going forward is financial resources.
Just a quick suggestion, if you target, 12 noon to 1, kind of like during the lunch hour, it's normally easier to get people with disparate schedules because we carve out some time to eat, hopefully. That's what people are doing. And since it's just half of the full hour, it's probably a lot easier.
How does everybody feel about that? You can nod your.
I think that's a good thing. I agree.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't have any restaurant owners on this one, so.
Works for me. I just can't do Mondays.
Okay. Is there another day that works best? Looking Tuesday through Friday?
You had mentioned Thursday, which is usually open, but I can be flexible.
All right, so that's what I think I'll do is I'll put out after this an email to everybody with 2 or 3 dates and times, and just see if one or two work best for everyone, knowing that we're not going to have it perfect going forward. In terms of communication, originally this was going to be a Teams call, and as I delved into Teams, which I've used a little bit, which is the town software we use, I was having a hard time getting everybody invited to it. So so for the meeting platform, what we're doing here, if nobody has any issues with it being Zoom, it's just very nimble and easy for me to send out stuff and operate. But Teams does present a way to gather documents and communications, much like Slack does. So since we were kind of IDing you, Tom, as Mr. Communications, what is your preference?
I've never used Teams for document collaboration. I've always used like Google Drive, which I know is available for free for anyone who wants to sign up. But I'm always willing to learn too. So if the group has a preference one way or the other, I do find Zoom to be a better platform for meetings than Teams. But I know Teams is the preferred vendor for the town. So I'm flexible, but my personal preference would be Zoom and Google Docs.
Okay.
Kevin, we actually use Teams for our audit. We're uploading documentation and it works pretty well. So if I had a preference, I would say Teams, but I'm okay if Tom thinks that Zoom is better. I trust Tom more than myself on this.
Okay. And then we're going to find a conduit on the town's website to, at the appropriate time to let the community know what the committee's up to, because of course it is a town committee, and we want to make sure they know that we've been formed and that we're hopefully doing some good work. So in the bottom of the agenda, I had listed all the sort of the sectors and the individuals on the committee associated with the individual sectors. I didn't require obviously any report back today because we're just getting started. But that's kind of how we see the makeup of the group right now. I think the first steps are going to be the hardest, right? Is taking this charge and what do we do next? How do we go forward? How do we proceed? To my understanding, it's we finish this, we will obviously set the next meeting date, but it's looking at your sector, and whether it's picking up the phone, whether it's via email, I can certainly share as many contacts at my disposal that I have with any of the members on the committee from the databases that we have with the town. But it's really a divide and conquer. It's just, reaching out to your sector, and maybe it's something where there's, and maybe you can answer this, Joanna, is, maybe there's some prefabricated questions out there, even a template of, of what we're trying to ask to identify those unmet needs.
Yeah, so I think that the first thing to remember is that these needs are talking about COVID-19 related.
That's right.
And I know that in a lot of ways, I know this is not new to you guys, but COVID-19 just exacerbated problems that were already there. But there are some things, especially like with the schools, that are very COVID-19 specific. So that's number one, that when you think about, when you talk about what are we looking for, COVID-19 related. The other thing is that, I think that a lot of us that were on the steering committee, we were just kind of thinking, you in your day-to-day interactions with people, in your informal networks, in a lot of ways, this is formalizing a process that's been informal among your group and in the people that you communicate with every day. So, we were just hoping that you already have your ear to certain institutions and people and sectors. So, if you're noticing something that comes up again and again and again, I would say talk first with Kevin and Dan. You two are like the co-chairs of this particular committee, correct?
Correct.
So first talk to them, and then, if you're seeing trends, then when you have these weekly meetings, say, hey, you know, we're noticing that this particular issue is coming up again and again, not only in this sector, but also in this other sector. And like you're saying, there's, you know, crossover from one into the other. One of the things that I'm really glad is that the faith communities are on this call, and because the faith communities have their finger on a lot of different pulses. And I think you're going to find them a really great asset in helping you meet unmet needs and actually identifying. I think they get to, they are involved in people's lives in so many different phases that they will be able to help you out with that as well. I think I'm going on and on. So I hope I answered your question.
No, you did, and I think it'd be an appropriate time to ask if anyone has questions in the group.
Kevin, I do. Are there limits to the funds? Does it have to be can it be a sole proprietor? Can it be someone with a side business? Does it have to be a formal corporation? Is it strictly Southbury, the funds? Is it regional? Kind of what's the box we can operate in?
Well, I think what you're referring by funds is sort of the idea that we were kicking around about whether we could allocate funds and make it available. I think we're premature on that. I think rather than be thinking about available funds and where could they be applied, and I realize that that's part of your charge here is the fiduciary connection. Yeah, we're not sure yet whether the funds are going to be something where those are just for, you know, small businesses and to help the business community, or whether as an outreach of this committee that we determine that, you know what, there are funds that are needed on a more broad basis, and that we may want to rethink how those are allocated. So yeah, so it's not quite in a box yet.
Kevin,
Okay.
can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted you guys to know that there is a philanthropy and finance subcommittee at the regional level, and we've been trying to populate that with people from the community foundations, and also from like federal credit unions or banks or things like that, or if there is a fund from a bank that works on nonprofit type activities. So I just want you to know that I really applaud you trying to figure this out at your Southbury level, but there's also going to be a network. That's one of the reasons the state wanted to do this. There's a network at the regional level, and then there's also a network called 4 Connecticut, I think number
Yes.
4 Connecticut, which if the region cannot accommodate or doesn't have the resources to meet an unmet need, it might go up to that 4 Connecticut level as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So at this stage, Rob, it's really identifying the needs, figuring out what they are, and first following essentially those channels. The finances that we were talking about at the top really were at this stage, at least, a focused, potentially small business fund that if PPP dries up and if all these other avenues dry up and businesses are still struggling, they might be able to apply for. So originally, we're not necessarily seeing it meet the broad-based needs that could come up out of this committee. We want to explore all those local, state, and federal channels that we can. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just wanted to throw out there, there is some guidance material out of FEMA for projects such as this called the Natural Disaster Recovery Framework. It's a 55-page document that goes into a lot of the principles behind this. You can just Google search it. Again, National Disaster Recovery Framework. The questions just now about the economic recovery stuff, there's a little blurb in there as far as FEMA and their take on things that it's at a higher level than what Joanna was talking about, but it gives you a understanding of where FEMA's coming from as we start moving forward with all this. Would you agree, Joanna?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah, and I found, I think I shared with the group before we started all of the sort of the state guidance that they put out about, how the long-term committees fit into the overall state.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah, And then there was, I did come across some of the FEMA documentation as well, but not the fifth. I don't think I've seen the 55-page one, Tim. So I'm gonna look that up. But you know, and concurrently, really tandem with what we're doing here, the town, as it did so effectively in the microburst, you know, the tornado situation, you know, is very much on top of tracking, you know, every expenditure as related to the disaster, to make sure that because we have that documentation, that any potential FEMA money that gets doled out to the state and trickles down to the communities, you know, we have a pretty fair shot at getting. I think we recouped, I want to say, Dan, 75% of our expenditures back in that tornado occurrence.
The tornado, we were one of the few towns in Connecticut that got a full reimbursement from FEMA because of the way we kept that documentation.
Yeah, so that's going to happen and is already happening really right out of the gate back in March when this began. So, you know, it's in tandem. It's a little different than what we're doing here, but it all kind of works together.
Hello? It's Neil.
Yes, Neil.
I'm looking for the hand raising, but I don't quite see it on my my Zoom. I can wave.
You can wave. You wave your hand. I can see it.
FEMA. We tried to bill them in the second quarter. It was an experiment. Local health departments don't bill FEMA. I'm not sure they know what a local health department is. It appeared to me that FEMA is used to hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods. Global pandemics is kind of new one on their radar screen, to say the least. Category B, we bought a whole bunch of PPE, denied. It was an experiment, so we're going to be back with them because we have a lot of needs and a lot of resources. We had a meeting with the state on this. We also had a meeting with Mr. Conover, the Demis public assistance guy for the state of Connecticut, on this discussion. It appears, at least so far, when we come back to FEMA for resources in now at the end of September 30th, we will have to fight for every single item and try to prove that every single thing is for the prevention of COVID-19 disease. We're up to the challenge, but it's a challenge. And leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we all know, this is global, right? It's certainly that means national for our country. And so, yeah, FEMA's got its hands full, you know. But we're, you know, we feel like if we do everything we can to both document, identify, and then make sure we, you know, like you said, raise our hand, hey, we have a need, then, you know, it's maybe the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? If we don't ask, we're certainly not going to receive if we don't make known that there's a need and needs that we have. So that's the primary purpose.
And may I just add a little bit more information, Kevin?
Absolutely.
So there's regarding the FEMA, and I think you're talking about the public assistance grants and all that. There was also an effort by the state of Connecticut that through the CARES Act, that they wanted to cover the expenses that were not going to be covered by FEMA public assistance. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Connecticut did have that was one of the things that they asked the towns to do, to estimate what were going to be your expenses regarding COVID. And they needed to have this in by, I believe it was June 30th. And so the towns did, you know, there was, at least in Region 5, there was 100% compliance from towns putting that in there. And that's kind of like well, we expect our town money will be X amount. Like Neil was saying, departments of health were not part of that, I believe.
No, yeah,
So,
health districts, regional school districts, we have a member of them on right now, are separate governmental entities in the world of FEMA. They are not
Right.
town
Right.
of Southbury or Woodbury or Oxford and Myatt did not submit for us. They didn't say, oh yeah, we put in $50,000 for you and you'll get the check next week. I didn't hear
Right.
that, and that didn't happen, just so you know.
Yeah, no,
And
I I don't disagree with you. I understand that. But I just wanted you to know the state of Connecticut did have a plan to try to help out with what FEMA is not going to cover.
Yeah, so we're just trying to get some resources from FEMA. Thank you.
In the district, we do have our own FEMA submission code, and we have began a few trial balloons, as Neil said, under our own. I also spoke directly with OPM, the Office of Policy and Management at the state, that will manage some of this. The only challenge for us is that the state did a first round of surveys and asked one set of questions, and then a second round of surveys. But the second round didn't allow for us to adjust some of the assumptions we made. And obviously the assumptions made in June about school reopening specifically to us versus the assumptions we're making now in August have evolved slightly. And so we're working with them on how we provide some new data on costs that we are now taking on that we didn't know about in June.
Yeah, I'm sure it must be changing rapidly all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. What is the target date, while I have you on here, Josh, for opening of the schools?
Currently, students will come back September 1st. Staff, we start new teacher orientation on the 17th of August, full staff back on the 24th of August, and then students return on September 1st.
Okay. So we'll all be talking before then, so good luck with that. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they want to comment before we wrap up? Tom?
This is Neil.
Oh, Neil.
Yeah, Kevin, we've had this conversation before. So we're a local health district. We were involved in the COVID-19 response. We're working with the school systems. We're doing contact tracing of the cases. Southbury has 2 or 3 cases a week. My district has 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, depending on the week. So our rate is similar to the state, give or take, small numbers. We are deep in planning for seasonal flu vaccinations, and we'll do them here at the health district. We'll do them in the schools. We'll do them in the senior centers. We got our shipment of state vaccine for children today. 800 doses came in today. We're a major vaccine provider in Southbury and throughout the rest of the region. We're in the initial stages of COVID-19 vaccine planning because it isn't a whole lot different than seasonal flu planning. We're going to be looking to raise more volunteers. So if you can help us with medical and non-medical volunteers, we met with the guy from the Waterbury Republican today for a story on our flu clinics and on volunteers. But we'd appreciate any help you can get us in getting the word out. Medical and non-medical, very much a challenge with social distancing to run flu clinics, where we used to have 100 or 200 people show up at 3:30. We can't have that anymore. So we have to do everything by appointment now. So we're deep into that. But there's another thing going on in the region. It's clearly going on. Hard to quantify. But the escape from New York is rolling fast. And I think last week my sanitarian, Joe, walked into my office with 10 new house plans spread among the 3 towns, but probably 3 or 4 in Southbury, Woodbury. I see this region is working together. Yeah, people might live in Southbury, but I might live in another town, but they shop in Southbury. They shop in Oxford now, too, at the new shopping center. So in the business development, for us to get 10 new house plans in a week is something that hasn't happened since 2005. When that was the big year of the boom. It was 2005 into 2006, and then of course it exploded. So there is something going on out there. It is real. It's not just talked about in the newspapers. There's a strong amount of new housing activity. Some of the school systems are seeing new kids, some aren't. I know Region 14 is up like 35. I don't know about 15, but they're seeing it in additional teacher needs or classrooms. I'm just throwing that out there from a from a business point of view. I mean, we can handle it, but we're just seeing it. It's fascinating to see it. Thank you.
Tom?
Yes, I have two questions for you, and then I apologize. I do have to run right at 3:55 to get ready for a 4 o'clock call. My two questions are this. One area I wanted to make sure we had covered, and it may be Neil's purview, but Neil, it seems like you have a very wide swath of considerations. But I wanted to make sure we were taking a look at mental health needs in this community. Which is another thing that I think could go largely undetected, but I think we're going to have a tremendous amount of need for resources. And then my second question, a much more technical one, is I understand we're now in the information gathering of this process. Once we've identified certain needs, do we raise those to Joanna and she elevates them ad hoc, or is there a formal process where we have to, write recommendations up? I mean, where does it go once we've identified needs? And does that go as identified, or do we have to put all our recommendations together at once?
Well, I could chime in, but I'd be speculating. So let me let me go to you, Joanna.
So right now we haven't formalized a process. As I was saying earlier in the meeting, what I was intending is that you as a group for Southbury identify unmet needs. When you have your weekly meetings, or before then, as soon as you can, through your email or however you want to communicate, talk to Kevin and Dan, let them know about that. And I will check in with Kevin and Dan, I would imagine, on a weekly basis, or by all means, just contact me. I have my email and my phone, just like you called me today.
Sure.
Let me know, and I will bring it to the steering committee level. Or, to the regional level first, among the subcommittees. I'll bring them to the appropriate subcommittee and say, philanthropy and finance, do you have any resources that Southbury, the small businesses are not getting from the local? I hope does that answer your question, Tom? Okay.
Yeah, and on a semi-formal basis, Tom, what I was envisioning is that we bring those identified needs forward. Dan and I will collect them, and anything that can be met on a very pointed local basis, we would of course not wait around, and we'd try to address it as fast as possible or find a resource for it. But then also raise that up to the regional level, and as early as possible. It doesn't have to wait like and only be a monthly thing. So that's kind of how I was envisioning it, similar to what Joanna's saying. So. I know you got to run, and I'm sure everyone does at this point. So, for next steps, folks, is I will just send out a recap of this, or maybe Tom will, depending on, we'll coordinate how the communication is going to go. We'll send out a recap and maybe do like a doodle poll for a noon time on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, see which one works best for everybody, and zero in on that next and steady weekly meeting, and then hope everybody can make it. And bring some further info. Like I said, we're in an intel phase right now of the committee. So if anybody has any, if anyone does not have any other further questions at this time, I will just thank you all for joining us. And I'm looking for any hands, any last minute, Dawn?
Is there a way perhaps you could share everyone's email address so that if we're discovering things, we have questions, we can reach out to the group as a whole?
Absolutely. Yeah, okay. We've got hopefully everybody's contact information and gathered in one place and disseminated to the group. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your service, John. Anna, thanks for hopping on at the last minute. I think actually we already lost John, but hey, we are in the middle of just coming off of a big storm. So, thank you, everybody. And we'll talk very soon. Take care.